Hello everybody, thanks for having us here. And if it is okay for you, we would like to take off our masks. So that's us.
Yes, and we talk about our work on learning analytics in the context of intelligent language tutoring systems and how to integrate this into the classroom. So let's start. Sorry, this jumped one slide ahead. So let's start by asking what is learning analytics in the first place. So learning analytics, this is the definition that you can read, is the measurement, collection, and analysis and reporting of data about learners and their context, with the purpose of understanding and optimizing learning and the environments in which it occurs. And we can ask then, how can this be applied? Well, I see two strands for the application. One is to inform humans better about learning, and the other one is to inform digital tools better about the learning. And we will talk about both of those strands today. So informing humans works by taking the data and presenting it in some way. So visualizations or dashboards or open learner models can do that. And for the second part, for the adaptation of digital tools, we can do two types of adaptivity. The first one is called micro-adaptivity, and this is basically direct feedback. So while you are working on a task, you already get feedback on that. And the second one, which we also heard in a previous talk today, is called macro-adaptivity. So this means adapting a sequence of activities to individual learners. So it's the same end goal, but the learning paths towards there are different. To be able to do something like that, we need to get data, because learning analytics is data-driven and we need to get some data. Where can we get them from? Ideally from authentic contexts, and intelligent tutoring systems come into play here. Because intelligent tutoring systems, they offer some benefits that make them desirable to be used in real-life teaching and learning. The first benefit would be that, as I said, there's feedback while you're working on a task. And so as a student, you can already get some feedback and improve your answers while you're working on a task. As a teacher, because of this feedback, you need to correct less, because the computer can already provide some assistance and do some correction for you. And this basically reduces the workload of teachers. And a good benefit from this is that while the teachers and students are working on a system, this generates data points, and you can use those data points to do learning analytics. So let's make this concrete. This is what we did. So we went from a printed school book here to a web platform, the so-called FeedBook, where we put the exercises from here into the web app and offered this direct feedback there. Here's an example of to illustrate why we are doing this. This is a scan of an actual learner answer from the printed workbook. And the task here is to combine those two sentences and to practice conditional clauses. The student wrote, if she listened more to Jillian, she feels better. The problem here is that without feedback, the student might not even be aware of the fact that there are problems in the answer, and also does not know how to correct them. So if we take this exercise and then look at it in the digital version, this is exactly the same exercise, but in the FeedBook. And you can see that it's also the same answer that the student typed, but now we get immediate feedback. So with conditional clauses type 2, we use the simple past, and the if clause, not the simple present. So this is the additional benefit I was talking about, micro-adaptivity, that such systems can offer. And why do we provide this kind of feedback? What's the role of feedback? So it has been shown in many studies that feedback is one of the most effective factors when it comes to learning gains. The problem is that in a regular classroom, typically the teacher is the only reliable source of who can provide feedback. So the student population is very heterogeneous. Everyone has a different background. So The problem is that as a teacher, I cannot give direct feedback to everyone while they're working on the task. But if you work on a tutoring system, then the tutoring system can provide this feedback to everyone at the same time. And this is how the tutoring systems can come in here. Here's another example from the FeedBook. This is a exercise where you're supposed to practice the formation of simple past forms. And you can see that for the answers that have been given that are correct, a student can immediately see with the screen check mark that the answer is correct. Now, if you put in something like here, try it, and you hit enter, then you can see on the next slide, we can see on the next slide that the system detects that there's a problem in saying that if an infinitive ends in consonant plus y, you change the y to I in the simple past. So the student then can correct this in the next step. So note that the system does not give the target answer, but the student is given a hint on how to correct the answer to arrive at the correct solution. Let's look at another exercise. This is a reading comprehension exercise. So you can see the other one was very closed. This is a little bit more open, this exercise. And here you're supposed to read the text and then answer those questions. The first one is, what does this person know about the writer of the card? So if the student writes something like, it is a Valentine's card, which does not answer the question, the system detects that there's a problem with the meaning and says there's important information missing. Plus, it also highlights the part of the text where this information can be found, so that I know, okay, I should read up on those parts here. We can see here, so meaning feedback and then form feedback or grammar feedback, what we saw in the beginning. And here we can see a combination. This is called incidental focus on form. And the person here wrote, the writer was a girl. And the system then says, this is the simple past, so you need to use the simple present here. And says, this refers to this part of was here. So you can see that once the meaning is correct, the system then focuses on grammar. And this is called incidental focus on form. We can see a combination of two feedback strategies here. So then the correct answer, you can write something like, the writer is a girl, or on the next slide, we can see it is a girl who sent a card, or on the next slide, the writer who sent the card is a girl. So you can see it does not work only on string matching, on surface matching, but there's a short answer assessment component behind this that evaluates the meaning and not only the form of the learner answers. So now we can see where the type of data that we're working with comes from. And we can use the same data, but use it in different ways for different target groups. We can see one example on the next slide where such kind of log data that it gets generated can be used to inform students better about their learning. Here is a screenshot from the Open Learner model in FeedBook, where you can see there are broad categories like future tense, past tense, present tense, and below that a spiderweb chart with green and red bars. And green means that you have used this construct correctly. So each edge here is a construct, and red means you used it incorrectly. And if there's no evidence, you can see there's no bar here. So you can immediately see what have I practiced already, where are problems and where are gaps. So let's look at informing teachers better about learning. Let's say we have an exercise here with 3 items, and I give this as a homework assignment to my students. Then instead of having to go through all the answers that the students provided, which I typically do when I do it on paper, I can also view an aggregated view here in the system. So this is a summary of what the learners did and what the system provided as feedback. I can see here in the pie chart, each slice is representing one feedback message. And the biggest one here says we are talking about something that was happening in the past at the same time as something else. An expression like while shows that this was happening for a longer time, so we use the past progressive. So knowing this as a teacher, I can go into my next class, and then I know that the students have problems with knowing that while is a signal word for the past progressive, and I can use that to prepare my next lesson. Finally, here is a view that you can also, it's also a screenshot from the system where you can see how many people worked on an exercise and were they successful in the end. So we can see on the x-axis, we see how many times people tried on an exercise, and on the y-axis, like how many people then actually submitted something. And red means that the exercise was submitted, but there were still some errors. So as a teacher, I still have to go over it and correct it. And green means that this was a fully correct, so everything was answered correctly. And as a teacher, I don't need to invest work in it. We can see that this is actually a good exercise because the green line here is most of the time above the red line, which means that the probability of like investing time and effort more often leads to a fully correct exercise than an exercise where I still have to put in effort. And of course, there are other exercises. You can analyze this for every exercise. So very briefly, for macro adaptivity, currently we're working on and evaluating a system that goes one step beyond that and provides adaptive sequencing. So it means the learning goals are the same for everyone, but the paths, the exercise sequences there can differ and are adapted to individual students. In order to do that, we need to model the domain. So what should be learned, activities, what is offered in an exercise, what can you practice in an exercise, what are the prerequisites, and the learners. We already saw how learners are modeled. And then a pedagogical module comes in that implements some pedagogical principles. For example, that closed activities are sequenced before open activities, that you have like learning phases so that you zoom in on a construct and then you start from easy to hard on that construct. And this of course leads to differences in the learning sequences, which means if you are faster, if you are better at this topic, then you progress faster than students who need more remedial work to reach the goals. And concretely, it looks like that in our system, that you can assign a topic, for example, tenses and simple past, that you can monitor the progress of students on this topic, but the concrete exercise sequences are decided based on the learner model and the pedagogical module and the domain module. And with that, I hand over to my colleague, Katja.
Thanks, Bjorn. Exactly. I would like to have a closer look at some of the points Bjorn just mentioned, and I would also like to add some new aspects from the teacher perspective. I'm somebody who did not only help develop the system, but I'm also a real teacher in high school, and I implemented the system. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Here we go. I need one. To go one, yes, exactly. I would like to start by saying something about the educational setup. Of course, the necessary infrastructure needs to be provided in school and at home. I do not want to give you any details on that, but I want to point out that it is not only infrastructure that is of importance, but it is also important that students are trained in self-regulation. If that is not the case, then the whole system does not work. Now, and how is the system, the ICALL system feedback implemented in the class during the course of a unit lesson? Step number one, and this is an absolute prerequisite, is that a new grammar topic needs to be introduced. Of course, this can be introduced in class, or it can be introduced in a flipped classroom session by using like some explainer video. And then on this seeding soil, it is our ICALL system that can be used either as homework or distance education or actually in class. And it is really important for us to point out that we don't want English teaching or foreign language teaching to stop at this point with these kill and drill exercises, as they are called. But we want to move on, and we want students to apply what they've actually learned in target tasks. We heard about that in one of the talks. That is really important to use complex, higher order thinking, authentic tasks where communication and collaboration is really important. So having said that about the educational setup, it is quite obvious that this is an immense impact on the teacher, because I have a complete new role. It is not me who actually designs the tasks, who assigns the tasks, who monitors what the students are doing. Instead, it is a system somehow that, you know, assigns all these tasks and things. And so and also it was in one of the other talks. The role changes from teacher to a more like a mentor or something, or monitor, yeah, to a mentor. And and also what I felt is that, you know, there was this huge amount of data being thrown at me, and I had to learn how to read all the data, right? And I had to understand, okay, kind of nice to know the proficiency of individual learners, of all learners, how they got there and how long it took them, and so on and so forth. But then my work actually started to draw the conclusions and, you know, decide on how to guide the individuals and what to do next in class, right? And also the role of the student somehow changed. We talked about a little bit, we touched upon the fact that it is self-paced and self-regulated learning, and but they are not, of course, left out alone, left in the lurch, but we guided them on the side. And so students actually, they reported back that they really were able to swim in a flow channel. Now, what does that mean? That means that due to the system assigning the tasks on each individual level, they were able to develop in the zone of proximal development. That means the tasks were neither too easy nor too difficult, and they could study on their level. And one nice benefit is, or a side effect is actually, this all comes independent of social background. And we heard this also in a talk this morning, that some parents needed digital skills in order to support their students at home. This is not necessary, and neither is to be able to afford expensive tutoring. And let's have a closer look at the stakeholders as well. Researchers are happy that they gain all this data from a real authentic context. And then also material designers, you know, based on this, the analysis and interpretation of the data, material designers have to rethink how to actually design textbooks. Now, because we know which tasks work and which sequencing works and what kind of scaffolding students need. And also it will have hopefully a huge impact on curriculum designers. For example, up to this present moment, it was only based on experience to decide on, you know, when students are cognitively able to, let's say, learn the if clauses or whatsoever. But now, based on this data, that might be shuffled around. Also, educational advisors, we have to rethink about, for example, assessment centers or school types. In Germany, for example, we have 3 different school types. Maybe we only need 1. And last but not least, teachers and educators have to rethink their didactical, pedagogical concepts and how we actually teach. So took me longer than I thought. I'm sorry for that, but let's put it in a nutshell. We believe it's a win-win situation for everybody. Teachers are not overburdened any longer with task design in heterogeneous classes. They have more time for the real stuff, for complex tasks in class. And students, because they are better prepared for actually complex tasks in the classroom, and also stakeholders, because important political and pedagogical decisions can now be actually based on scientific data. So much for today. Thank you very much for listening. And now we are more than happy to take some of your questions.
Thank you very much for your presentations. I'm very happy that you pointed out that to make distance learning and different digital learning environments successful, students must have self-regulated learning skills. One of the key competencies for lifelong learning, but important to acknowledge this. Now, any questions? Okay, I will give the gentleman here.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Grazie from Malta. We completely agree with what you have presented and everything. Our question is was the software developed commercially, in the sense that educators have to procure it, buy it? I'm asking this because in Malta we are trying to digitize education, to have digital software. The challenges that we're finding is, first of all, you have to have a pool of developers to develop these kind of software. If not, you have to buy off-the-shelf software. Secondly, if you're going to try to develop this kind of software, then there are the intellectual property of the textbooks, which obviously you have to respect and you cannot copy. And then there are a whole legal issues and so on and so forth. Third, this kind of software costs a lot, because you have, when you buy a book in Malta, usually the public schools, you collect at the end of the year and then you give it to other students next year. So in that case, you might save some money. When it comes to software, you have to pay a license per user per year, so it will cost much more. And another issue is that you cannot give direct contracts to software developers and companies because of public procurement regulations and EU regulations, where you have to open up for competitiveness and so on. So then we'll end up of changing software every 2 or 3 years. So when teachers start getting used to the software, because the uptake of software is very slow for teachers and so on, when they start getting used to it, then you're going to stop it and perhaps introduce new software. So we are finding this digitization very, very challenging. Perhaps you have researched about it or have some solutions for this. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Very important points. So first of all, the software is non-commercial. It's only used for research. It's also possible to sign up there. In the new version, you can even create an account by yourself. We always get messages of teachers registering there. About intellectual property, in this first version of the original FeedBook, we had a cooperation partner with the schoolbook publisher. And for the purpose of this project, they allowed us to integrate the exercises into it, but only for research purposes, not for commercial purposes. And in the second version, in this adaptive sequencing, we have now developed our own materials. So we moved away from the publisher because we need more variance in the exercises. So if you want to do adaptivity, you need to systematically tweak the parameters, make it a little bit more harder, more difficult, more open, more closed. You need many variants of an exercise, which typically is not provided by a traditional publisher. This is why teachers like Katja and our colleagues developed our own materials there.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask if the FeedBook could be used for learning languages in general, for example, for exchange students or maybe for even other countries?
Yes, it's a great question. So what we have developed is for English, but the methods could be applied to other languages as well. Like what you need to do is you need to first start off by observing what students actually do, because like students, in our case, 7th grade students, they don't produce all kinds of errors, but they produce something that reflects their current level where they are. Like in 7th grade, you learn certain constructs and then you make certain errors about them. I would say if you want to adapt it for other languages, you would collect some textbooks like we did, analyze them and ask teachers, what kind of feedback would you give to the students, so that we as developers can then write rules that target the misconceptions that the students have and the type of feedback that the teacher would give. And I think that would be the process of adapting it.
Okay, yeah. Hello, my name is Sanna Oines, and I'll come from University of Helsinki from the Center for Educational Assessment. And thank you for your very inspiring presentation. I think you have developed a really nice platform. I'm curious, since we are trying to, and we actually do have some kind of the similar computer-based assessment tasks as you have. And we also do the research based on the log data as well. And I was thinking that while you study that, or in your online platform, students are learning quite specific grammatical skills. So I was thinking that, have you already studied whether these skills they learn, I think, pretty fast in online? Have you already studied whether they are transferred to when they have tasks in paper-based context without this feedback, which I think that gives hints and directs their decisions in online, whether these skills do transfer? Have you?
Yeah, so we did a randomized controlled field trial for 1 school year to evaluate the effectiveness of feedback. So we had 4 topics, and we switched control and intervention for each topic so that everyone gets the intervention at one point. And so the experiment tested whether this direct feedback, how this relates to delayed feedback by the teacher. And we found out that the students who, like over 1 school year, the students who got this direct feedback in a pre-post test design for each topic, they on average had 62% better results in the post-test than those with the delayed feedback. So we think that we have shown that this is highly effective. We also wanted to evaluate it against like work on paper, but the control on paper, they dropped out because they didn't see the point of just logging in and doing a pre and post test, but not benefiting from the system. So one thing to consider, of course, is things like novelty effects, that when you get a new tool, then you're motivated to work with it, and that could also make it difficult to compare it on paper, but it's something that we had wanted but have no empirical evidence at the moment for.
Okay. Thank you very much. Katja didn't have the microphone, but I suppose that you understood her reaction. Just one moment. There is one question at the Confiva from Ivana Juraga. So she asked, Katja mentioned that it's also a win for researchers as they get access to real data. In connection to that, have you come across concerns from students or parents about their data being collected? So are there any concerns about data collection? As a teacher, do you feel well equipped and supported to make decisions regarding such concerns? So it's the problem of the data collection, yeah, one maybe important problem in learning analytics.
Yeah, it absolutely is a challenging issue we have to tackle somehow. I don't know. I know that other countries. No, okay. Let me start out by there was this one presentation in which I was impressed by the list of tools being used, like Google Classroom and things like that. And I was whoa, that would have never been possible in a German classroom, because really, let's say we are really obsessed with data protection and stuff like that. So. Actually, yes, parents are concerned. We have to put a lot of work into, explaining where we are coming from and what we are doing And as soon as we mentioned that our server is at the University of Tübingen, and that neither Apple nor Google nor one of the other big players have access to our platform, and that we are not, you know, I'm a civil servant. I'm not allowed to sell anything to any, you know, commercial whatever. Then most of the parents are actually happy with that, and they agree to take part in a program like that. And the leftovers, they get a special arrangement, so they use the platform, but we guarantee that we don't use their data. So because we don't want to have, let's say, second-class citizens in the classroom, so they participate as all other students, but we don't use their data.
Okay. Hello, so thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. Representing Lithuanian Education Ministry, Vilma Ferrari. In one of the pre-last slides, you showed that instead of giving the next task by the teacher, the system provides a suggestion what he can learn, what he can exercise. So what is my question is, could you explain a bit more? What is the logic or the algorithm behind that? Because this is quite challenging.
A very decisive question. Okay.
Yes, but it's a great question, and I think that there's not too much research on that, so we have to explore a lot ourselves. And like I'm developing, but I'm always talking to teachers because we need to implement their insights into the design of the adaptive algorithm. So what I can say how it works is it has 4 components: a domain model, which models kind of the things that you should learn, a very detailed manner on, like in a hierarchical model about language use and morphology and syntax, and then many subconstructs like comparatives, then regular, irregular, and so on. So first you model what should be learned. Then the second component is a activity model that very precisely for each, even on the level of items, says this is what needs to be produced here, and this is what also occurs, so like target versus co-material, and these are the prerequisites. So I need to have learned this or that before I can like meaningfully do this exercise. And the third component is the learner model that records what have I already done, how well have I done it, where are gaps, and what are common misconceptions that I have over time, like tracking it longitudinally over time. And then the final component, the fourth component, is the pedagogical module. This is basically I would say, AI-based implementation where we implemented pedagogical constraints on how the algorithm should behave. So it, as I said, it has learning phases, implements learning phases where you, for each construct, zoom into a construct and then start with easier, and then step by step go to harder exercises, so that you start with, for example, interactive exercises in the beginning where you need to like just move elements, and then later you go to production where you have to type, and then you go from like one word to sentences essentially in there. There are other considerations in there. For example, looking at the learning goals, that you always need to put in a learning goal what should be learned, and then basically the algorithm uses those constraints, searches the space of exercises, and then finds the smallest distance between the learning goals, the activities, and the learner model. So in essence, I would say you can view it as like a vector distance-based approach. It tries to minimize the distance between all those like 3 dimensions, I would say.
Hi, my name is Michal Rimer. I'm from Slovakia, the Ministry of Education. And you mentioned that the self-regulation is a prerequisite for using this tool. Could you tell us a bit more about whether you prepare the students for self-regulation? What did you do, or could you just elaborate on this condition, please? Thank you.
Yeah, self-regulation, I mean, means that you have to set your own goals and find your own paths, and constantly monitor what you are doing, and work together with other students and things like that. And we found, I don't know about teaching in your country, but usually there are, of course, different models in Germany too. Like, you know, some in some classrooms, the teaching is really task-based oriented, so that you can explore and stuff like that. But in other lessons, it's just the teacher who does all the talking, and the students don't do anything, don't have to organize and monitor, are not responsible for what they are doing. And actually, so in my school, what we did is we started changing the setup of the whole school. Well, we changed like the classrooms looked like and things like that. And we gave them, we said, okay, we want to do a lot of task-based learning. And we also want to, we changed this, we changed the way the school day is structured. Is not like, you know, 60 minutes of English and then 60 minutes of maths and what's so on. And here are different tasks they have to explore. And of course, students have to learn how to get organized and how to, you know, actually go outside of the classroom and start, you know, with their work and stuff like that. So we have a close mentoring program. Each teacher is responsible for only a handful of students, and then on this basis, I can decide if, for example, this student is already ready to leave the classroom and do the tasks outside of the classroom, or if the student is even ready to stay at home completely and do the tasks online and what have you. And you know, this is so they get badges of being a proficient self-regulated learner or a beginner, and depending on this badge they receive, they have freedoms they can take advantage of. But this is not a static system. You have to guide them, you have to give them feedback, and then yeah, train them in self-regulation. That's only a short glimpse. It's a huge question and an ongoing process for all of us, actually.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, one more question, and then we'll go to the next session. As you can imagine, our session is prolonged a bit, so it will not finish at 1 and 10 minutes. Yes, so you just be patient and stay a little more here with us. So yes, 1 minute.
Hello, I'm sorry if I changed the subject, but I was very interested in what you just said about the change that is happening in your school. Could you briefly describe it? When did it happen, and why and how? Whether is it an initiative of the headmaster or the teachers? Could you just briefly describe it?
I'm afraid briefly it's not possible, but I try as best as I can, actually. Okay, but let me go back to the year 2013. This is when some iPads were thrown into our classrooms, into our, well, let's say conservative classrooms and teaching environment. And we figured that this does not work. This simply does not work. We have to change how we teach, and then we started changing the way we teach and give more responsibility to the students. And then we found out, hold on a second, how can we give students more responsibility? If they are sitting like 30 students crammed in the classroom right in front of us, we have to change the way the school is built, actually, or is decorated, or what have you. And the way we did it was, I'm still to this day, I'm very thankful to our headmaster and our headmistress, who said, she said, okay, everybody who's willing to participate in this process gets some free time, actually, to do this, to start developing it. And we started out with only, we are a big school. I don't know, we have about 800, not that big, but 800 students. And they said, okay, take 100 of our students and start doing it. But what you need to do is you constantly need to report back to all the other staff members. And what was very helpful was that we also implemented, so there were about 20 teachers who were willing to participate in this process. And what was extremely effectful and helpful and was that we implemented something that we called professional learning communities. So yeah, you are nodding your heads, right? So we actually developed lessons together. We tried them and then reflected on them, and we met on every other week to talk about our students and also to talk about what we actually experienced in the classroom. And so this process happened in this process has started in 2013. It's an ongoing process, but it is only it was only last year actually during Corona times that it is sort of obligatory for all of us it is complete. We have a new pedagogical concept for the whole school. And when I'm talking about the whole school, I'm not only talking about teachers, I'm talking about the students, I'm talking about parents, everybody who participates in the system. But we are far from being perfect. It's still a long way to go, but at least we're trying.